Hello, welcome. We are going to get started. I am pleased to introduce Dr. Julia Sweetland, our first short talk speaker for this session. She will be presenting Framing for Maximum Impact, sharing evidence-based communication strategies that help organizations reframe social issues and shape public understanding. Dr. Sweetland is a sociolinguist and senior advisor at the Frameworks Institute, where she helps advocates and experts reframe public conversations on pressing social and scientific issues. Since 2012, she has led strategic communications initiatives on topics ranging from climate change to health equity, bringing the science of framing to changemakers nationwide. Can you please join me in welcoming Julie?
Thank you. It's good to be with you and to see so many of you here at this time when conversations about communication need to happen in coalition. There are so many unsound, unsettling, and unjust things taking place in terms of equity right now. And that can make it hard to know how to respond, what we can do to contribute and play a positive role in our personal lives, of course, but in our own organizations and certainly in the organizations that you all are funding. I don't have all the answers, but I do have one big idea to offer that history shows is an essential one. The way we frame issues now in this noisy, uncertain, and chaotic moment will affect what's possible later. And while it may not seem like enough, let's change the way we talk about it, it's certainly as good a place as any to start, because one of the few things we can control in a moment like this is the way we communicate. As Lauren mentioned, I'm here on behalf of the Frameworks Institute. We're a nonprofit celebrating our 25th year. We're a group of social scientists and social change strategists. So I happen to be a sociolinguist. We have other linguists on staff. We think about the way language works so that you can work language. The sociologists and political scientists on staff are quick to remind us linguists that it's not just the words we say, but the systems and institutions they're entering, whether that's our electoral system, media gatekeeping strategies, or social movements like ours. The anthropologists and the psychologists help us get deep into culture and deep into understanding how people think. All in all, it's not your usual communication shop training or staffing. And that's because we believe the communications aspects of social change require as much evidence and as much rigor as the policy positions and the programmatic work that mission-driven organizations undertake. So we do this research, often with support from major foundations, and we live to our nonprofit mission by making our findings and resources freely available to other mission-driven organizations. And we work alongside storytellers, organizations, and coalitions to integrate framing research and recommendations into their ongoing social change and communications strategies. So I've got 3 ideas about what not to do in this moment, and then a whole lot of ideas about how we can cut through the chaos. Right now, one of the things for us all to remember is not to get stuck in the fact that the work seems harder all of a sudden. First of all, for many people working on the front lines in communities, the work has always been really, really hard. And so to the extent that we're in a posture of I'm shocked, that often can end up alienating the very types of allies that we want to engage, right, in pressing for change. But the other thing is that understanding that when the work gets harder, that means it's at its most important. And it becomes more and more important to be strategic. So regardless of the traps ahead of us or the forces kind of swaying around us, it's important that we remember that strategic responses are essential right now. And staying out there in a communication and staying out on an issue, especially when it gets harder, is critical. When an issue becomes more polarized or more politicized, that makes it all more important for voices of reason to join the conversation. This is because the risk of a spiral of silence is real and dangerous. Because when dangerous and deceptive or extreme ideas dominate due to a lack of opposing voices, people are left only with hearing those dangerous and deceptive ideas. And one of the strongest predictors of what people will believe is the number of times they have heard it. That gives us not just the opportunity, but the obligation to stay in public discourse, ensuring that people are still hearing ideas of what it means for fairness, justice, and inclusion to prevail. So this isn't a moment to go quiet. If you'll permit me just one quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. I think that's true from a movement perspective as well. If we stay on the sidelines, people are only going to remember, right, the words of our enemies. They're not gonna, our silence won't give them much to counter that. Finally, in the face of complex or unknown risks, we can't stay comfortable with admiring the problem. Now, I know this never, ever happens in philanthropy, but sometimes, it happens elsewhere. So in the face of complex or unknown risks, right, we can't forget about the risk of staying stuck in the paralysis of analysis. Yes, the discourse, I'll concede it, the zone has been flooded. Yes, the social media, it's so fast, it's so bad, it's so fragmented, right? All of these things that make our communications and the impact of our communications that are causing risk to that, right? Those are real, but we need to move past a situation analysis. Remembering that a situation analysis is essential to an effective response, but it's only the first step. An effective approach may come with costs or downsides and still be the most strategic option available to us. Or, as Dr. Harriet Breaker put it, seeking perfection is demoralizing and seeking excellence is motivating. So setting an appropriate goal for what you can accomplish often will let us move through the fear and the analysis into action. So, some ideas for how to do that. We are in a moment of chaos. I'm willing to concede the zone has in fact been flooded. By which I mean deeply conservative voices have substantially changed the information environment by having lots of bad things happening all at once, by becoming willing to disregard the social norms of civil society, and both in terms of what's permissible to say about certain people, certain groups, certain issues, but also in terms of how they're communicating and what they're doing. So this means that those negative narratives, they make the work harder, they make the work more important. There are reasons that we need to be out there in public discourse, but also we have to, a way to get out of that admiring the problem is to just get really good, really fast, really efficient at recognizing and naming these negative narratives so we can move past that into what we're going to put into discourse instead. So I'll go through three. There are many, but I'll go through three. The first is the rugged individual narrative. This is the idea that obstacles are just opportunities for a person who's determined to succeed. You can think about this in terms of when a person does well, it's due to their own talent and effort, and that if you are the right character, those obstacles are just spicy plot points on the way to your triumph. And by extension, when someone's not doing well, it's due to poor choices, misguided values, or lack of effort. I know this is familiar territory, so I'm not going to dwell here. But it's important that we all keep this foundational cultural narrative in mind. For one reason, it affects all of our issues. So countering this narrative is one thing that we can do collectively in coalition. For another, it shapes other cultural narratives in important ways. Particularly, for instance, this one, the historical progress narrative. This is the idea that America ended racism after the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Anyone who's still harboring racist beliefs is kind of an outdated relic of a bygone era. So it is important to respect, celebrate, and learn from the achievements of the civil rights movement that unfolded from the 40s through the 60s. But most Americans have learned an oversimplified version of this that ends with the landmark legislation and judicial triumphs of the movements, as if those were the fairy tale ending in which racial hierarchy and its effects were ended. And in that narrative world that ends with, and then we lived happily racism-free ever after, our cultural perceptions of people of color are shaped in harmful ways. If systemic racism isn't a barrier, then people conclude that unequal outcomes in health, wealth, etc., must be due to the failure of the individuals involved, right? And this is one way in which individualism and othering are linked. So being aware of this narrative and having ways to counter it, which I swear I'm getting to. And then finally, a related narrative, the zero-sum narrative, that society is giving too many kind of extra rights and resources to them, those with the failures of self-makingness, right? Leaving us with less. Now, the us and them can get filled in different ways depending on the topic. It is typically, right, the them is a group with less power in society. The us are those with more privilege and power in society. But these three narratives are really at the core of what we're hearing that is just coming out that's, again, deceptive, dangerous, and symbolic violence in the discourse around us. So what do we want to do? Well, if we've gotten really fast at naming those narratives, we can get past our daily outrage much faster and into work, and we can reach for a counter narrative that we can use consistently. And it's important to remember that often we think we're countering a narrative, but really we're just offering different points, okay? We're marshaling a set of facts or counter arguments to these, and that's like trying to run a marathon in flip-flops. No matter how much you train, no matter how hard you work, you just aren't equipped for that. So we need to talk about these things in terms of story, in terms of narrative, familiar plots, familiar characters. That's what gives us a narrative. So one of them is the collective power narrative, that when we work together, we make things better. We have found that Americans are feeling exceptionally disempowered, frozen, confused, and they throw their hands up in despair. And one of the few antidotes that we've found that can really move people into a space of, I want to be involved, I want to make a difference, this is not right, and I want to join in fixing it, are stories of collective power. The idea of collective power, but then bringing in those stories of how that can actually work. Another one that's very important is the narrative of righting wrongs. The idea that we have a chance right here and right now to repair an unfair situation. Often this brings in an element of history. And we're not the first people to point to the historical roots of injustice, obviously. But I think Frameworks research has something valuable to add to this time-tested advocacy practice. We found that it's vital to explain history, not just mention it. So on our work on health disparities, we found that we could, in rural areas and conservative areas of the United States, we could engage people in productive conversations of, yes, we want that health equity policy, as opposed to that health equity policy is zero sum, it's doing stuff for the urban people. When we gave people local examples that showed how the past is affecting the present, and crucially, what we want the future to look like, what the future would look like if we did something. Americans are having trouble imagining a positive future on anything. It's not just you. And so pointing to the future, offering an aspirational vision of what we can do is really important. We found that when we do that, when we explain how one thing is affecting the other, we reduce individualism in a statistically significant manner. So really the difference being, instead of just saying one thing is associated with the other, showing how one thing affects the other. The third chaos cutter is mastering the basics of managing deceptive discourse. So by deceptive discourse, I mean these different types of untrue stuff that's going around, right? So there's misinformation and disinformation. For instance, that's just stating a fact that's on because you heard it and repeating it is misinformation. Actively saying that when you know it's not true is disinformation. So being transgender is a trend promoted by liberals, right? That can be misinformation or disinformation depending on the knowledge of the person saying it. Another is manufactured controversy. This is a sense that there's a big fight going on when really no one was talking about that. You just made up that fight. So boys and men are unfairly competing on girls' and women's sports teams, right? That's a manufactured controversy. And then finally, a moral panic is a narrative that says you are at risk of becoming a victim by a dangerous and deviant other, right? So the moral panic is your daughter isn't safe in that bathroom on that sports team. Take action. right? Because she may be harmed. So thinking about those things, again, understanding which one we're up against. I'm going to give you 3 great ways to help those kinds of lies spread further and faster. I know that is the talk you really came for. Number 1, you can repeat the falsehoods. They lied. You know what? Best thing, most effective prediction of what people will remember is the number of times they heard it. Give it some more times. Just go ahead. Say it a few more times. Don't do that. All right, you can play in their frame, accept the terms of the manufactured controversy that they've offered, or, you know what also works really well? Be rude and patronizing to people. They're so dumb for believing that. If you don't want to help lies spread faster, you could try these things. You could explain what is true in clear and simple terms, giving people a way to understand how the issue works in reality. You can normalize what's true and warn against what isn't. Let people see, right, how the information discourse is being manipulated. And we can humanize the scapegoats, but also the people who are being deceived, so that it's a safer, more reasonable conversation. People aren't engaging in that spiral of silence because they're scared of reprisal, but rather are more willing to enter the conversation because it seems like a conversation worth having. So a couple of examples about that. Instead of talking about how close, repeating the connection between vitamin A and measles, we could, this is a 6th grade level, talk about how to keep kids healthy during a measles outbreak. We can tell people how something works, what to do, but also why, right? We want to take the vaccine. Well, why? Because it trains the body's immune system. During an outbreak, remember it spreads very easily, right? And then what to do about it. Or if your child gets measles, talk to your doctor, remembering that home remedies can be dangerous. This is telling people what to do in clear and simple terms without repeating the lies, without being false and rude or patronizing. So that's an example. And instead of playing in their frame, we can think about this one. So the manufactured controversy around sports, this is a place of marshaling those facts. They're not looking to perpetrate fraud. They're just looking to play, and that's not unfair. I've got my flip-flops of research showing you that the bodies, right, are not really that different. That is not countering a narrative. That is, again, bringing those facts to a narrative fight. And so an alternative narrative is let them play. Kids should play, right? And that humanizes the folks involved. It's not repeating the falsehood, and it's a story that people can get behind. Finally, I'll just say we need to tutor our intuitions with evidence. For instance, we found that the word equity, Americans think that means how much you paid down your mortgage. And it just doesn't hold as much resonance as ideas that have been around longer and louder, like fairness and equality. We have found that the frame of dignity, leading with dignity, the fact that every person deserves, has innate dignity, and our choices as society should honor it and treat everyone with respect, is just as powerful, has just as much as an effect as an equity frame, which often goes astray. So I'll just end with this, that it's important that we are out there continuing to frame these issues, not staying in a hidden posture. Our enemy right now is apathy, cynicism, and fatalism. And this leaves people very open to authoritarian-friendly beliefs. But every time one of us, a grant maker, a communications officer, a board member takes a step in this fight, 1,000 pairs of eyes watch and learn. Courage is contagious. Thank you for the time. I'm over by like a whole minute, so don't clap, just let Lauren go. But find us on social. Thank you. Let's continue the conversation.